People always look for people who want to change the status quo. EdTech has to always work in sync with the human factor. You can never say that a teacher can be replaced by technology. You can never replace learning from a classroom. You can amplify it with technology. You go to a tier 1 city even today, you ask a grade 1 kid, where does an apple come from? He say it comes from a supermarket. I always wanted to vent out, not in anger, but through art. I always said that it's not about what you become to the world, but it's about who you are when you're back home after what you become.
Wow. That's something very new. I've absolutely
So
not
I
heard that.
contemplate on that because the world sees you in one way, but who you are to your family, that's your true self.
An educator, an entrepreneur, an alumni from Cambridge and Oxford. Today we have with us Dr. Karandeep Singh. Hi,
Thank
sir.
you. Thank
We
you.
welcome you on board.
Pleasure.
Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule and having this interview with us.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Firstly, I am very curious as a student myself. I would like to know, how did you get into one of the top Ivy League colleges in the world? It's a question that I'm sure a lot of students have.
Yes, of course, it's a very good question. See, there were two factors. One was passion, and second was perseverance. So, the logic was I needed to find the area that I was generally passionate about, but at the same time good at. Sometimes it happens that we're really passionate. Let's say I want to be an astronaut, but I'm not good at that, so I can't be. So I was always fascinated with audio, right? And I was really good at it right from childhood. So I said, okay, I've done sound engineering. Let me take a leap and try and apply for a scholarship at Oxford with my research project that I had outlined, and let me see what they say. So there were a couple of interviews that happened. They liked what the direction that I was going into. It was a new thing in those days back in Europe, talking about electroacoustic composition. It was fairly a new, acute idea. They said that, okay, we would back you up with about 60% scholarship, and we'll give you the research grant to do this particular research project. So it was genuinely, honestly based on A, expertise and passion, but also B, genuinely, yes, the academic background of being a sound engineer with really good distinction did help to secure a place at Oxford. And the idea of research has been very important to my profile. I love the idea of learning and exploring how to innovate. So that was something that Oxford really appreciated at that point.
So now you were not just part of Oxford, but you also got a grant for your research.
Yes, I did. I was a
That's lovely
fellow
to hear.
to run electroacoustic as one of the modules. Oxford at that point was very keen to start a new vertical in audio production with electroacoustic. Electroacoustic was basically something that was very European, like especially in Germany. It's been going on since almost the 90s. But when we come towards the United Kingdom, it's not very common because it's nature-based music and it's not instrumental. It is more to do with what we call sound aesthetics and sound acoustics. So there's a lot of science to it. And I was more interested in understanding the science of sound. So that was something that they said makes sense, and that's how I got into the research with them.
That's quite that's quite inspiring for us, knowing that it's not impossible to get into one of the Ivy
No, it's
Leagues.
not. On the contrary, actually, I'll be very honest with you. There is this whole, predetermined thought that we have that we can't get into big colleges. See, anyone and everyone can. You just have to back up something that you love with something that you can prove that you can do. See, people always look for people who want to change the status quo. So if you are someone who is bold, but with bold you also have a backup of competency, there is no door that will close on you, especially with Ivy League colleges because they're more diverse, they're more open to young people's ideas. So on the contrary, if you look at more private institutions, they're more one-dimensional. But when we talk about established old universities, they're very receptive to young people.
That's very assuring to hear as a student myself. So I'm sure you've done your schooling in India.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes.
So, but after doing your schooling here in India and going to Harvard,
Right.
studying outside, what was the difference you found in the kind of education system that we have here and there?
Sure. See, my schooling was very diverse and interesting because my father, being in the army, an officer, he almost every 2 to 3 years he had to move, right? So I had schooling from very diverse backgrounds. Sometimes I would be studying in the west of the country or the south of the country or somewhere way up north. So I learned, and also a lot of boarding culture. So I found amazing practices also. I'm not saying that it's all, we generally really put our education system down because it's easy to criticize. But someone who's seen both sides of the coin, which is the Indian system and let's say the UK system, the difference that I found, one very good part about our education system is that we have a very strong grounding, something that we're slowly losing, but I'm assuming the NEP is going to bring it back. At least in theory, it's bringing it back, so practically, if it happens. One important factor that I was able to bring back to India was experiential learning. Outside, you're not supposed to be someone who's just depending on your percentile. In fact, on the contrary, percentile doesn't matter. What actually matters is that who you are as a person and what do you want to do with what you're studying. So that was the very important difference, because typically in a CBSE kind of setup, it's all about what you get in the marks. On the contrary, there it's all about what you do with your course, not the marks.
Not the mark.
So it's experiential, it's hands-on, rather than here it's more theoretical still. But things are changing for the good.
Right. So, I mean, it's best to ask from somebody who's had both the experiences, because we often tend to criticize, or rather say,
Yes.
put down our education system.
And absolutely, absolutely. And see, constructive criticism or critiquing a system is part of an educator's job.
Absolutely.
But at the same time, when you critique something, you need to have a solution. So, I mean, as you know, because of the advent of social media, we love criticizing things. But do we come up with solutions to them?
No.
That's where we stop.
We leave
So
that to
if-
the authorities,
Exactly.
right?
So you want to blame someone. See, it all starts with you. I mean, with me. We're all part of the same ecosystem. So if we want change, then let's be practically part of the system rather than blaming a system which we have only created.
Absolutely, I agree, totally agree with your words, sir. And knowing that, as you mentioned, that you come from an engineering background, to be precise, you were a sound engineer, if I'm not wrong?
That's correct.
So from there, moving to the path of being an educator, it's vastly different, right?
Yeah.
How did that journey come to be?
Interestingly, I always found that the transition was so seamless, or rather the metamorphosis was very, very seamless, very streamlined, because as I told you, it was an accidental blessing. See, my mother is a retired college lecturer, taught for 35 years in Punjab University. There's a strong influence from her life on my imprint as a child. And because I was always research minded, I was very inquisitive as a kid, and same happened in college. So when I got a chance to actually teach electroacoustic to first year students after graduating, so that was a breakthrough, because I could actually see the transformation happening to the students. And then I was very fascinated with the English language. So in fact, me and my wife, we both did something from Cambridge University called CELTA, which is basically teaching English as a foreign language, because we wanted to travel to Thailand and Southeast Asia and teach. We did that. And then I went on to do my post-graduation from Cambridge in teaching. The reason I did that was because very early on I realized that my background in sound and my background in education has a very strong balance. In fact, it's worked in my favor, because every organization that I had or work with, my creative synthesis of how organizations should be with my operational experience gel really well together. So I found that it was, rather than a redundant element, it became a productive element in my profile in the last 10 odd years. So it's been really helpful actually. And I always tell people, we have all these stigmas about moonlighting, and I always tell people you can't stick to one particular genre of work. You need to explore. So I still am a freelancer. Along with working, I have my own 2 startups, and I still am working on production. I still compose. So you can't give up on your passions even if you turn 30, 40, because you can't lose your original self. So if you had a passion, you can convert it into careers, and you can mix careers. There is no one pathway to create a career, or a profile for that matter.
Absolutely. Absolutely true, sir. So with the edtech, I think you're in the edtech industry, if I'm not wrong?
I've been there for quite a while, yes.
Right. So having experience of that side of the world versus the kind of education that is still dominant, I would say, all over the globe, which is the traditional
Right.
teacher-student kind of education
Right,
system.
right, right.
What do you think, like, Do you think edtech is going to take over that whole system, and will it be beneficial?
Right, that's a good question. See, edtech, from a very humanistic perspective, cannot take over, simply because edtech has to always work in sync with the human factor. You can never say that a teacher can be replaced by technology. That's a very big misstep that we in the edtech industry took during the pandemic, where we said we could teachers are replenishable or replaceable. It worked counterproductive to biggest edtechs. On the contrary, tech has to empower the human educator. So yes, edtech will stay, but it will always be a hybrid mode where it should be a supporter to the brick and mortar system, not something that tries to replace. You can never replace learning from a classroom. You can amplify it with technology. You can, make it more creative with technology. You cannot replace the teacher from the classroom, because education is a very human to human connection. So if you want to put it completely AI based, you lose the human connection, which is happening right now. There's a massive burnout rate, not just for people who are working in edtech, but if you look at the 2022 bubble burst of edtech, 95% of the edtechs in India are either shut or run in losses, because being a PhD candidate, I've been doing a research, something which we call a sustainable business model. 95% of the edtechs in India never had a sustainable business model, which basically means they never planned for the next 5 years. They said, okay, when the pandemic is over, then what? How do you transition? How do you work with schools? And B, you cannot take over their business. Educational institutions will always stay in a physical setting, but they can be amplified really well with tech companies. So that combination of the marriage between edtech and K-12 or higher ed is what is going to be the balance.
Right, so it's only a catalyst in the background, but still.
Yes, it's a very
Everything
critical
else.
catalyst, but it
Yes.
cannot overpower or it cannot replace the way education works. When I say traditional education, that we're not talking about a teacher-centric classroom. Of course, it has to be a student-centric classroom. It has to be creative and innovative and holistic. But can edtech replace these values through tech completely? That is something very challenging for a company to do. I've not yet seen a company trying to sell that sort of an idea in India, right? So I would say it has to be a combination of both the entities.
Both the elements.
Collaboration is the key. Competition is counterproductive to education or any business. Collaboration is the only way forward.
Right, sir. So, like, it's very interesting to hear that coming from you, who's experienced it hands-on. We were like pandemic students. I'm a result of the pandemic education, and being a college-going student, I've understood like the loss of 2 years of physical college interacting with the environment. It has taken us back a little bit. It's made us more slow. In a lot of ways, it's taken us back 2 steps. So I think it's very nice to hear from somebody who's working in the industry that we still need to focus on our traditional roots and
Yeah.
follow certain paths to the way it
Absolutely.
is.
Balance is the key. Equilibrium is the key to life. We cannot put all our eggs in one basket, as we say, right? So, especially for young people, as I was telling you during the talk, this next 5 years are going to be extremely critical, because the industry will be defined by young people. And India also is one of the first countries which has the maximum population of youngsters between the age of 21 to 29. So, if that age can be tapped into, this country could revolutionize.
With that thought, I would like to know your opinion on what kind of curriculum would you like to add to our education system, if there's one thing that you could change or add and make it mandatory for the students till like a certain age, what would it be?
See, even from the students, first I would want to focus on the pedagogy and quality of teachers. It is very, very important that we, first of all, as a country, we have always neglected early childhood education. We do not understand the importance that between the age of 1 to 8, it is the biggest critical point for people to understand the child's development of cognitive skills are actually happening there. We underlook that, and we also underlook the training of teachers. So from a student's perspective, if I say the number one thing that we need to educate them on is nature-based learning. See, they need to understand the value of why nature. I mean, you go to a tier 1 city even today, you ask a grade 1 kid, where does an apple come from? He say it comes from a supermarket. So they have no idea what is the ecosystem of how we eat, how do we create produce, right? So that connection with the earth is extremely important if you want compassionate leaders, because we have to understand as a generation that these are the children who are leaders of tomorrow. And if you look at the present scenario of the world, you have failed leaders who are waging wars. Why? Because they had poor education. You have the ex-president of the United States of America saying that global warming is a myth. So I'm sure his teacher must have turned his in her grave, right? So the fact is, education system is the one that defines your perspective on life. So grounding is important. Understanding the value of nature is important. Understanding why sustainable living is important. These factors will define our next 10 years, whether we are able to sustain this planet or we're heading towards something which is more catastrophic.
That's absolutely true. So all your words were to the point, and we all, I'm sure, all the viewers will also agree to what you're saying. So during our conversation, you happened to mention that you were an army kid. How did that have an impact of you being a student, or must I say being a person? We've all heard stories about army kids being disciplined, being brought up in like a certain lifestyle which is very strict.
Right.
So do you think that helped you become the person that you are today?
See, I would say that yes, to an extent. This is a general stereotypical view in India that army kids are very disciplined. But again, every side has two perspectives. Army kids, if you ask me, are also very spoiled because they're always groomed up in this very easy atmosphere, where there are people to help and there's always vehicles available. So I would say it's a very individualistic perspective. Just like the guy who's in a classroom who the teacher knows, even if I don't teach him a word, will still get 95%. All comes not just to schools. See, the problem is parenting, people don't understand, is the biggest teacher. Parents are actually more critical than the teacher who spends 7 hours versus 23 hours with a parent. If the ecosystem of the house is ideal, the child will definitely bloom. Yes, the army does give you a lot of perspective on life because you travel a lot. You meet people from all parts of the country. But how you intake that is an individualistic choice. Some army kids, turn out to be, we use the term army brats, very egoistic, very proud of, oh yeah, I can do this. Generally, they turn into negative personalities when they work. But at the same time, if you're humble and reflective, then you can understand the value of life. So it's again a very relative perspective, individually embraced by each kid.
Nice. Looking at you, I would say that it definitely worked in favor for you.
I
What the
think
environment?
yes, environment
Yes.
did help because there was a lot of grounding, there was a lot of humility in life. The value of small things is so important. I always tell students every small thing matters. When we use the term carpe diem, it means that you need to seize every moment. You cannot procrastinate and assume that something will happen. Future is an ambiguous state. You cannot expect the future to happen. You got to make the present work for you, and don't dwell in the past.
That's actually words of wisdom coming from you, sir. It's absolutely true. Ending the session, I would like to have like a quick round of rapid fire,
Okay.
right? First question I would like to ask is, which is the favorite place that you've traveled to?
I would say Bhutan.
Bhutan. Oh, that is lovely. People say it's heaven on earth.
There's in Paro. There's a monastery called Tiger's Nest. Since I was a child, I was fascinated to trek it up. I love trekking, so Paro has been one of my most beautiful experiences of trekking up to the monastery, which is in the hills.
That's lovely. Which is your favorite book or an author that you always rely on?
I've been heavy into Beat Generation writers from the counterculture. So one of the writers and poets called Allen Ginsberg has been life-changing for me as a teenager.
Right. Growing up, what was that one subject that you look forward to the most?
Literature.
Literature.
Poetry is my Bible, I always say.
That's interesting. So again, coming to the same lines, is poetry your like your hobby? Is that something you like to catch up in your leisure time?
No, I take it very seriously. I think poetry defines a person's personality. If you are not able to express, I always tell people explode rather than implode. If you implode, it's horrible. So explode means express what you're feeling. Whether you paint, whether you take a photograph, whether you make music, you have to express. So ever since I was young, I always wanted to vent out, not in anger, but through art. So poetry was like a therapy session for me. I would pen down what I'm feeling, and it is still continuing in my life. So I was thankfully able to publish one poetry book back in England, a favorite 20 poems collection, and yeah, it is a very integral part of my life.
That's great. What's one favorite memory of yours in college?
College. I think one of the favorite memories in college was getting an opportunity to work as a sound engineer in London in a place called Royal Albert Hall. Royal Albert Hall is one of the most, you can say, legendary places where, right from the colonial times, it's been one of the massive theatrical places where the biggest artists play. So getting a chance to work as an intern audio engineer there was absolutely a dream come true.
Ah, that's lovely. What's one lesson from your life that, or one saying that somebody has told you that you would like to carry on forward all your life?
I think one of the things which is important, I think possibly uh, came from my father, and I've been reflecting on it through life. It's about, always said that it's not about what you become to the world, but it's about who you are when you're back home after what you become.
Wow.
So,
That's something very new. I've absolutely
so
not
I
heard that.
contemplate on that because the world sees you in one way, but who you are to your family, that's your true self.
Keeping your grounds really strong, I think, right? Absolutely. It was lovely talking to you, sir. Thank you for taking time with us. Lastly, I would like you to sign this as a memento for the WitChat show.
Absolutely, I would love to do that. Should I sign it here?
Yeah, yeah, anywhere will do.
Okay. All right. Any specific thing that you want me to write, or?
Anything, sir. Absolutely. Best wishes would be lovely.
Oh, yes. There you go. Is that okay?
Thank you so much, sir. It was a pleasure having this talk with
Lovely.
you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. If you like this video, please subscribe to the WitChat Show, which is absolutely stimulating and intellectually very, very beautiful. And I think you would find a lot of interesting conversations here, just like the one that I had now. And I hope that you learn a lot from the show. So again, I completely endorse something beautiful that is happening at the WitChat Show. Thank you.